And welcome to Habs Unfiltered, episode 148, Game 2 post-game episode. I'm your host, Blaine Pudvey. I'm joined now by my co-hosts, Matt Smith.
Good evening.
And Treg Wilson.
Good evening.
Not here tonight is our Sanity.
Yeah.
You're in for a fun show, folks. Super fun. So we had our episode 147 this morning. Please go check that one out. We broke down what we saw in the first game, what we expect in the second game, and throughout the series. I mentioned the key matchup being the second line and wanting to see more of a killer instinct from the Canadians before I would change my mind on my predicted outcomes for the series. I saw neither. So my prediction stays. I see this as a 7-game series.
I stay at 6. But I mean, there were things to this game that changed the way the game was played.
Yes. And everybody knows what that was. And that is clearly the desire to win one for JT. That, it's all about him. It's all JT. No.
I don't even remember his name coming up tonight during the broadcast.
Just
like the way you think that the game was played out, that the only player on the ice was Austin Matthews.
Well, is that any different from any other time they do a broadcast?
It's ridiculous. It's hard to watch. Like the loss aside, watching a game on Sportsnet right now is hard to watch.
It's always hard to watch.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible, especially when Matthews scored. It was like a giant eruption of orgasms in the Sportsnet studio.
I
want to
turn the volume off.
I want to give a shout out to Eric Macramella. He's on TSN, and he does that All Dress podcast with the boys from TSN. He came right out, called out the whole thing. Like, this is a guy. He's a lawyer, but he also works at TSN. And this is what he said. The English language broadcast is so heavily tilted in favor of the Leafs that it's tough to watch as a Habs fan. Back to the French feed. I completely agree.
Yep.
And He follows it up. It's unfortunate. The English language broadcasters have a duty to present unbiased commentary. They have clearly abdicated that duty.
Yeah.
I can't argue against that.
Yeah.
Can you?
And you got some of the idiots that are out there on Twitter, and there's they're calling out like the French language. You know what I mean? Like, I speak French. My last name's Smith. I'm about the most English person you're ever going to meet in your life. But where I grew up, I learned some French. You can target teams, you can target players, but people start targeting a whole language. It's kind of funny, But.
There were quite a few. I saw quite a few retweets, people pointing at some Leaf fans who just came right out and said, "Fuck the French," and called us frogs. Folks, it's a friggin' hockey game.
Exactly.
Can you stop with being bigots for one fucking night?
Exactly. Like I said, I'm a Habs fan, but I'm very English. I live in Ontario. I'm a Habs fan. It doesn't make me a frog, I don't think. But
Treg, how much French do you speak?
Je parle français un peu.
I'm kind of tired. I grew up surrounded by Anglos and Leaf fans, and I heard this all the time. And I even had some of them as I was growing up. Look me in the eye when I couldn't speak a lick English. I'm going to come right out and say it. I just couldn't speak English. I understood it, but I couldn't speak it. And several of them would just come out and say, "Speak white." That was an actual term used. And it sickens me to see it continue. And I know social media can be a cesspool. So all I do now, block. I just block that shit out. You don't need that in your timelines. If you see this stuff, and I'm speaking to all our listeners, if you see this stuff, just report it, block them. Do not retweet them. Do not share it. Do not give them the attention they so desperately need because their parents didn't hug them as children. Now, moving on to the game. We talked about the commentary. We talked about the bigoted morons online. So let's talk about the game. Game started out pretty even. The first 20 minutes, the Canadians kept up with their game plan for the most part, but clearly Toronto stepped up their game for a little bit of a pushback. They obviously were a little bit more motivated. You know, the whole win it for John Tavares stuff. It's clearly they stepped up their physical game to meet that intensity that the Canadians started with. And then in the second period, after Kotkaniemi scored the opening goal and the Leafs tied it up, second period rolls around, different game altogether. So do you guys want to start on the game itself or Kotkaniemi?
Game itself.
Okay.
Uh,
So the second period rolls around. What happened there? Trey?
Montreal got called for everything for a penalty, like everything.
Yeah.
I actually made a tweet saying after Montreal scored, saying anyone want to put money down on the first penalty power play going to Leafs. I was wrong. It actually went to the Canadians, and it was their only power play.
Versus the
I
five
wasn't
that
so
Toronto
upset
got
about the
thrown.
calls made against Montreal. I was more
because
upset
those were penalties.
most of them were penalties. Some of them were kind of soft, but
Ticky
sure.
tack, yeah.
What I was upset with was the calls that weren't called on Toronto, like the checking from behind in Kotkaniemi, the elbow to Gallagher in front of the net, the interference to Armia while shorthanded, the hacking, the slashing, and the checking, and the cross-checking from Toronto that never got called. And Montreal's penalties were like a cross-checking penalty, a slashing penalty.
The Lehkonen
checking
slashing
from
penalty was
behind.
bullshit. That's the one call that I don't think should have been a call.
The checking from behind on Byron. How are you going to call his checking from behind on Hyman and not call the one that was on Hyman's on Kotkaniemi? Like it's the reffing in this league. It is not just in this game. Seems so biased to certain teams in the series that it's not even funny.
Well, look at Craig Berube last night. Lost his shit on the reffing. He said it was disgusting and embarrassing.
John Cooper did the same thing in the Tampa, Florida game.
Yes, he did.
And so did Rod Brindamore in the Carolina game, Carolina-Nashville series.
And what happened to those after that happened? After they called out the reffing?
So far, no fines.
No,
well,
no
Berube's
fines.
was just last night, so they haven't played yet again. So
yeah, but the other games where they screamed bloody murder about the refereeing, the next game you saw a very different approach by the officials. Tonight, if we don't see Ducharme lose his absolute shit, you may disagree with how the game was called and say it was perfectly done. If you're a Leaf fan, you're happy, and that's fine. I get it. It went your way, so you're not gonna want to rock the boat. And you may think, as an outside fan, that the calls were made properly. But this is the playoffs, and gamesmanship is involved. If Ducharme doesn't come out and just lose his bloody mind to try and bring to light, like, you're right, there were some horrible non-calls. If he doesn't bring that to light, then I think that's a failure on his part.
Agree.
Pay the fine.
He's not going to pay it anyway.
No.
The players or the management should be throwing the money in for that. But the way I looked at it is I wasn't upset about the calls Montreal got. Really, I wasn't.
Except for the Lehkonen one, I thought it was bullshit.
Slashing was a bit soft. I thought some of them were kind of soft. Like Kotkaniemi broke his stick on the guy's back. Okay, call that as cross-check. I'm fine with that. It was all the non-calls that pissed me off.
Yeah. I lost count. I stopped at 17, but I just lost count at the number of times the Leaf forechecker would kind of trip up or hold, clutch, grab, or interfere.
It was all the picks
with the defender coming for going in for the puck. It wasn't like it was the race to the puck and they were kind of jockeying for position. They were literally coming up from behind and clutching, grabbing, cross-checking, stuff that usually called. I mean, look at the stuff they called on Montreal. It's not that much of a difference. When you're making it so that the last man back is falling on his ass to give you a scoring opportunity, that's got to be called. I don't mind non-calls if a scoring opportunity isn't created, but you have to call the ones where scoring opportunities are created, and they didn't.
I'm not going to make excuses for the team. There were other factors to it.
Oh, yeah.
However, it's tied up now, and this is now turned into a best of 5 series.
Yeah. So the big reason the Canadians lost, I mean, the reffing was bad, but that's not why they lost.
It was definitely a contributing factor. Let's just say that. You brought up the first period being quite even. The second period, it was, penalty after penalty after penalty after penalty. One of them being a challenge that I'm still looking for a reason that challenge was ever brought up. And, good on the Canadians for killing that off and not even allowing a shot. But it was still another 2 minutes. Their penalty killers had to be out there, and they couldn't roll their lines like they wanted to. The officiating, it was awful. It really was. And you could have, even the slash at the end of the game from Simmons, that wasn't initially called. They ended up calling roughing after the players went after each other.
And Simmons being the tough guy that he is, because, they brought him in for his toughness. Simmons showing how tough he is, waited for the referee to get in between before he threw a punch.
Exactly.
Just threw a punch. Yeah. Skated backwards.
Yeah.
Let the referee get in between them. And then when all the referees are paying attention to the scrum, throws a punch at Edmondson.
Yeah.
Because he's a big, tough guy.
Yeah.
Now, he won that battle in front of the net. Like he was showing dominance by doing that, and that's where everything started. And he should have just left it at that, because I lost respect for what he was doing in that moment when he threw the punch from behind a referee.
Yeah.
That is Brad Marchand level stuff. You don't do that.
Yeah. But with all the penalties, it really took the life out of the Canadians, because then they're like, well, they're going to call everything on us. And even though the Canadians did end up at the end of the game, they still out-hit the Leafs. It was a closer margin than the last game. Yeah, they did. It was a closer margin to the last game. The final tally ended up being 44-36 for Montreal. And I just found that that intensity wasn't there like it was in the first game. They weren't finishing their checks as often. The players that we noticed in the first game didn't really see them because you're shorthanded most of the goddamn game.
Yeah. They got away from the game plan. Like, let's be honest, it was 2-1 before all the penalties actually started happening. So before we get into it, let's be fair here.
And they only got the one power play goal.
Two power play.
They got two. They got one at the end. But it was 2-1 before all the penalties started happening. But the Leafs were down by a game. The Leafs are favored to win the series. The Leafs are Sportsnet's babies. The Leafs always seem to get a penalty when they need a power play. They always seem to get a penalty when they're down by a goal. They always, you know what I mean? Like it's called, maybe I'm throwing a conspiracy out there, but it just seems like the Leafs get opportune moments every time they need it. And sure, again, I'm not going to complain about the penalties that Montreal got. Mine were the non-calls that didn't go Montreal's way. And I don't mind non-calls either, as long as the non-calls go both ways. If you're not going to
call a certain way, call a certain way. Stick to that.
If you're not going to call Hyman's check from behind on Kotkaniemi, you're not calling Byron's check from behind on Hyman. You just don't do it.
But he did.
I think both of them should have been called.
Well, there wasn't an initial call. That's the thing. It was after the scrum and after everybody came in. The only person they took from that pile was Byron.
Yeah.
And he got to check him from behind penalty.
Exactly. And there was no initial call. There's no arm. They came up.
That's right.
And another thing I found weird
everybody down
was, why did the same referee ref both games? One of the referees was the same referee as the game before. That never happens.
Yeah.
It's always a different crew, which I thought was kind of weird. So
I gained a new respect for Chris Lee after this game. That's all I can say.
You're absolutely right. Just to get off refs, there was more to that than the game.
True.
I didn't find
true.
Tatar Gallagher couldn't hit the net. I didn't find the Suzuki line stepped up. I didn't find the Deneau line stepped up.
The Suzuki line hasn't done anything for 2 games.
No. The Deneau
despite
line
all the
didn't
ice
step
time
up
that he's been given.
offensively.
Yeah. let's just say it this way. I've just got the stats up really quick. Stahl, Perry, Tatar, Lehkonen, and Suzuki all were without a shot tonight. And the face-offs were atrocious. Suzuki was 3-10. Danault was 6-15. The only one that was actually a positive was Kotkaniemi, and he was 6-5.
Was I the only one that saw how many times a Montreal Canadiens center was thrown out of the face-off circle?
Yeah, that was
It
quite a
seemed
few.
like all the time.
That was quite a few.
How many face-offs did Toffoli and Lehkonen in that have?
I'd have to just give me 1 sec.
That because just look how many face-offs the wingers had.
Yeah, I want to see the stats on that.
Toffoli had 1. Byron had 1. Tatar had 1. Anderson had 1. Lehkonen had 1. That's it.
Not as many as I thought then.
Yeah, there was at least I counted at least 6 times. I found it a little odd.
5 or 6. Yeah.
And I saw the Leaf center get thrown out a couple times too. And I mean, I've done coaching clinics, reffing clinics. I have a hard time understanding this face-off rule the way they're applying it, because it's not the way it's taught, at the lower levels. I mean, I'm only a level 4 referee, so what do I know, right? I'm only qualified to ref, major junior games. So what do I know?
Yeah.
But it just seems odd. Now, with the Canadiens in this game, Treg, you're right. They were listless. After the first period, they became listless. I'm sure having to kill 5 straight penalties didn't help, but there's no excuse for not going to the net, not hitting the net with your shots. I mean, you don't need to power shots through. Just get it on net. Get to the net. Finish your check. There was none of that. And that's why the Leafs were able to push back and take control.
Gallagher and Tatar missed wide open opportunities to put pucks
Yes.
in the net.
Yes.
Both high danger situations, both in the slot, both had time. Gallagher did it twice. Tatar did it once, right over the top of the net, all 3 times. And it's just Suzuki had a good chance, and his was a bit different because he had guys on him. But Suzuki had a good chance and he missed. I don't even think he got a shot on the net. Actually, he didn't. You said, but those guys got to step up. Like everyone's saying, put Caulfield in next game for offense, but that's great if you put Caulfield in. But if he has no one else getting him the puck, or no one, he's really not going to make that much of a difference. He should be in. I think you only score 2 goals in 2 games, or 3 goals in 2 games. Put your best scorer on the ice, and that's Caulfield.
Yeah.
But
and give a little bit more time to guys like Kotkaniemi. Kotkaniemi tonight was one of their better players, and he only got 12:49 of ice time.
A lot of that had to do too with
penalties. A
almost
lot of them
8 minutes
had
power
to
play
do with the
time,
penalties.
penalty kill time in
Still.
the second period.
You got 19
So-
minutes to Danault. You got 19 minutes to Suzuki, 12 minutes to Kotkaniemi. And Kotkaniemi was outplaying Suzuki tonight.
He was, but
Yeah.
Suzuki also played PK and Kotkaniemi did.
Still, a little bit of that 5-on-5 time, because Suzuki just wasn't quite there. And when Kotkaniemi was on the ice, they had control of the play. His expected goals for were above 60. His Corsi was above 60.
So going into Montreal on Monday, just to remind everybody, it's a back-to-back in Montreal.
Yeah.
What lineup changes, if any, would you make? I'll start with you, Blaine.
With me, I would definitely bring in Caulfield. You need scoring. You have to bring him in.
Okay.
I don't know. You can debate between Tatar and Armia. I saw Tatar's name out there quite a bit, but you're not going to break up that line. So I
No,
would.
I don't think so. They did towards the end of the game just to try to find something that worked.
I would push Armia out to bring in Caulfield, because you take Armia out. We covered it in the last episode, why I would do it, because Caulfield can just slot right into that spot. And I would assume Evans might be able to play. So you're looking at Romanov, Evans, Caulfield. These are all guys that could easily be brought back in, because in this loss, it wasn't like it was a hard fought game and they just missed out. No, they got their asses handed to them in the second period and just couldn't find a way back. So the lack of discipline really killed them.
If Evans is good to go and can come back into the game, is he draw back in?
I think so.
Who do you take out though?
Exactly.
Stahl.
Stahl wasn't playing bad.
Wasn't bad.
Either.
But you can bring Stahl back in for the second game in the back-to-back and put Evans out.
Personally, I put Romanov in for Merle and I put Caulfield in for Tatar. I think I know you guys say don't break up that line, but Tatar's been doing absolutely shit for 2 games. And I'd rather keep Armia or someone Lehkonen and Byron in for their penalty killing and defensive abilities.
Yeah.
Well,
I can see Armia being pulled out, but
what's that line going to look like now? You take a Tatar out. What does Deno's line look like?
I say you put Anderson or Toffoli with it.
You move Toffoli up?
Put him on his right wing. Move Anderson up with
to have Anderson, Suzuki, and Caulfield.
Yeah, put Anderson on the left. And then you have your third line, or you have your Armia on with Perry and Toffoli, or Perry and Stahl, and your fourth line the same. That's what I would do.
I'd at least bring in Romanov just to amp up that physicality that they were lacking, especially your first game at home. Even though there's not going to be fans in the stands, playing in your home rink, you want to play a little bit harder. So I would move him out for Merrill as well.
And Merrill hasn't really done anything one way or the other. Like he hasn't shown me that would be any better than what Romanov could bring to the game. Actually, I think Romanov would hit more than Merrill would. So what I think will happen, I think Armia will come out for Caulfield is what I think will happen. And then Caulfield will play on that third line or that line with Suzuki. That's what I think will happen. But
Ducharme, as we're recording, Ducharme is having his press conference, and he just mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that he's considering Caulfield as a potential spark after 2 even strength goals and no power play goals in 2 games. He said it's possible, like everyone available, we have depth and we're going to use it. So that kind of points to him being aware that the team there is just no offensive spark right now. They really need to find a way to generate scoring, because it's all well and good to out-hit your opponents, but what good is that if you're not scoring goals?
And Monday's game is a pivotal game. You go down 3-1 to the Leafs. That's a big hill to climb to get back in. A big hill to climb.
Yeah.
But if you make it 2-2, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, the only thing that Ducharme ended up saying on officiating was said I was surprised by the way it was called tonight.
I'm disappointed. I want a more forceful response. The Canadians are just so vanilla when it comes to this kind of stuff. There's no, with all the talk of character, we want our character, and there's no like actual, not like there's no character, but like a character act. You pretend to do something. You go against your own interest in a way by calling out the referees, but sometimes a good outburst helps push things your way. Like look at Claude Julien. For years in Boston, he would yell and scream at referees. He would have a complete uncontrollable outbursts after games. And for a while, it balanced things back out. I'm not saying do it all the time, but I think in a case like tonight, I wanted to see Ducharme explode.
Which shows that it shows the players that the coach has their backs, right? I would have liked to seen something as well, because you can preach character all you want in the dressing room, but you got to have the same behind the bench at the end of the day.
Ducharme reminds me of a robot. He just, even behind the bench, there doesn't seem to be any emotion. There doesn't seem to be any. I don't know. He seemed like he had more fire when he was in Halifax. Maybe it's because they were
Yeah.
younger, but it just seems to me like I expect him at least come out and say, there's stuff I can't really talk about, but
Yeah.
Our whole game plan went off the rails because of stuff that went down during the game that we had no control over. Something like that. Like you don't
Maybe-
even have to.
Maybe it's the fact that he still has an interim tag on him and he doesn't want to say the
Shouldn't
right.
matter.
It shouldn't matter. You know what? He should be sticking his neck out there, but I think that's part of it.
You're
I
an
think it's the
interim
fact,
coach. You got nothing to lose.
That's
You got
right.
nothing to lose.
Well, you're
if I were him-
basically,
but he might be seeing it from the other side. That's how
Sure.
that's how I'm looking at it.
but he's interview basically everything he does is an interview for the next job, whether it be in Montreal or somewhere else.
Yep.
So by having an outburst, by showing that he has some kind of, deep down fire and he's willing to flip tables and shit. Some GMs like that. They want to see a guy who's under control, but at times will show that fiery side. I'm not saying go John Tortorella on him, like not all the time, but once in a while.
John Cooper did it perfectly.
Yeah.
He said it perfectly. He said, "Hey, I don't mind that stuff in the games. I don't mind it, but when it only gets called one way, and you got a superstar lying on the ice from an injury, it's the guys with the stripes that got to settle these scores, not us."
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he said. And then when they let stuff go, stuff like this happens.
Or just come out and say, if you're going to call one team and only one team. Now, I'm not saying they only called one team, but tonight they kind of did. But if I'm the coach, and if I were Dom Ducharme, I would come out and say, if you're going to call everything on one team but not the other, well, I'm not going to tell my guys to ease up. They want to go out and do whatever, go do whatever. You're going to get called no matter what you do. Make it worth it.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I would have done it tonight if I was behind the bench. I would have said, boys, don't let up. You get called for it, you get called for it. I'm okay with you doing your job.
Their preparation for tomorrow, their practice, if they do a practice, etc. That's going to really be key going into Monday, because there's going to be a lot of calls to make some lineup changes, and there's going to be a lot of pressure to really come out and perform in Montreal.
Yeah.
I mean, the series is only 1-1, and let's be honest. Montreal for 4 periods was toe-to-toe with Toronto.
They let up.
And we all know Montreal's inconsistent, which they've been all year. I'm not worried yet about the series. I still think Montreal can come back and win Monday night. I think they need to win Monday night, especially with the back-to-back games coming up. But yeah, and it'll be interesting to see going into Tuesday's game who starts at net. If it's Price, not that I thought Price had a bad game.
It's going to be.
I don't think Price had a bad game, but
I think Toronto, in a way, Toronto did Montreal a favor on this. I mean, the Canadiens come out of Toronto with a split. I mean, that's not the absolute perfect scenario, but coming out of Toronto with a split on the road, when you're the road team in the playoffs, is always good. So you're coming home with the split, and then Toronto handing Montreal their asses in the second period, taking control of that game and it kind of making it a little bit further out. I mean, the empty net goal aside, it's a 4-1 game. That's not close. So by keeping it a little bit further away, it's not a close game. They don't say, well, we were kind of there almost. This forces their hand to make changes, and it'll motivate the players. So I do expect a much different Montreal Canadiens team on Monday.
I totally agree. Also, this is similar to the Pittsburgh series.
Yes.
Montreal won the first game, got blown out the second game.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think they lost 5-1 the second game in that series.
Which is exactly what happened tonight.
Yeah. So,
and
I thought it was ballsy of Ducharme to pull Price at 6:30 too, when they were down 4-1.
Yeah.
I kind of like the guys up. I see what you're doing. I like that. Maybe they should pull Price for the whole game next game. I don't know.
Just turn the net around.
They only had 1 goal against.
But you saw at the end of the game too. Weber got into it with Engvall. He was yelling at the referees. It's not something he normally does. He's not very vocal with the officials. He normally just goes up and kind of whispers to them, sometimes angrily, but never just comes out and just yells.
Yeah, I
And
think
he
that
did
was more. I think that was more off of the face-off that Deneau and Thornton took, and as soon as they dropped the puck, he gave him a two-hand on the stick,
Yeah.
and then they tossed out Thornton and they redid it. I think it was more about that, but
But
Paulie was
it's out
speared
of
on
character.
a face-off too. That wasn't called.
yeah,
Anyway,
But
I
Weber's
really,
pissed. So
I personally hope that the only thing that we're looking at for the next game is we're not talking about officiating. I hope that's not that. I hope
Yeah.
that's not the main story of the game. I hope we're talking about one good play that won it for either side, or a big hit, or whatever brought energy to whatever bench, and not the officials.
and I think it should be put out there that this is not just a Montreal Toronto problem.
no,
This
Hundred
is
percent, 100%.
This is an
100%.
issue across the league. Officiating's been an issue all year.
Yeah.
Now it just seems like certain teams and certain series are getting the favorable calls than other teams.
Yeah.
and we brought
it's
this
not-
up throughout the season.
Yeah.
We have brought this up in episodes throughout the season, and I've pointed to this in the past as well. The NHL needs to get their shit together when it comes to officiating, especially if they want to bring gambling in.
Yeah, hell, we had a ref that was caught, earlier in the season, like trying to kind of fix how the game was going to be,
And it didn't
manage
get better, it
games.
got worse.
and it hasn't,
That's the
it
funny
hasn't
thing
got
about
any
it.
better, right?
Well, he got punished only because he was hot mic'd, and people.
Yeah,
He didn't even really
100%,
get-
100%.
He didn't even really get punished. He got
They took
sent
away his
home.
last chance.
Yeah,
He was retiring.
he got forced into retirement, is what he got.
Yeah, but he
Wow,
was supposed
actually-
to have that last game, that last little lap, and the wave goodbye, but they took that away because he was on a hot mic.
Boo hoo. He still got paid.
Still,
Still got paid, still got the pension, right? So
but that was his penalty for being hot mic'd.
Yeah.
And it was a cosmetic fix and a cosmetic punishment.
Yeah.
And they've done nothing about it since.
we all know that the league is going to make, they're obviously they're going to try to push these teams. They're going to try to push some of these teams that have the stars and everything in their lineup, because at the end of the day, they keep getting these players' faces on the media. It makes more
Yeah.
money for the league. It's
So
more airtime.
I think that pretty much that sums up our view of the game. Yes, the officiating was bad, but it was not the reason the Habs lost. The Habs lost because they lacked discipline, and they gave up. They stopped skating.
And they got
were
away from
not-
their game plan.
They got away from their game plan. They did not keep up their intensity, and the next game is going to be telling.
Yeah.
Because Weber at the end of that game was pissed. He's going to go in fired up. He's going to have to fire up the team. If they come out the way they did in this game, in game 3, the series will be done much quicker than I expected, and it'll be deserved, because the Canadians don't deserve to win if they don't play to win.
Yeah.
So I think that does it. Treg, anything?
No.
Matt?
I just want to say thanks to everyone that's listened to all our shows, and I hope you guys have been enjoying these recaps.
Are you not entertained? All right. So I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And remember, if you were talking about it, so are we.